In 1977, my grandfather died of pneumoconiosis after decades of working as a coal miner. Even though he'd long moved on from working down the pit, the coal dust he'd breathed day in and day out had done its damage, and the progressive and irreversible scarring that resulted from it eventually killed him. Coal miners' pneumoconiosis, or black lung, is caused by the constant inhalation of fine, insoluble dust particles and a gradual and progressive deterioration of the lungs as they become inflamed and scarred. It's a disease that has most likely plagued coal miners for centuries, yet it wasn't until the early to mid 1900s, at the tail end of the Industrial Revolution, that it began to be recognized as a serious occupational disease. Despite massive advances in technological innovation over the previous century, uncertainty in the science behind black lung delayed action on this occupational killer. This was an uncertainty that suited the mine owners, and one that they seemed to be in no hurry to address. In the 1800s and the early 1900s, coal was what fueled the Industrial Revolution, and mining corporations and manufacturers couldn't afford to acknowledge that they might have a problem. It wasn't until the 1940s in the UK that substantial steps were taken to improve workplace conditions down mines, following a growing recognition of how serious a challenge lung disease was amongst miners. Even then, pneumoconiosis continued to be an issue. And in the 1990s, 50 years after those first substantive steps to improve working conditions, I became involved in a new wave of efforts to address occupational lung disease in coal mines. The mines I visited back then, all in the northeast of England, were dusty, but not oppressively so. Yet there was a palpable tension between trying to comply with exposure regulations and struggling to remain solvent. In 1991, similar tensions had led to a scandal in the US coal mining industry when it was discovered that dust was either being removed from samples designed to monitor exposure, or the samplers were being intentionally misused. The intent was to make it look as if dusty mines were complying with federal regulations, even if they weren't in compliance, in an attempt to put profits over the lives of those mining the coal. Over 800 mines were implicated in the tampering scam, and the proposed fines that resulted exceeded $6 million. Similar concerns prompted some of my work in British coal mines, and one of my last visits down an English pit was to ensure samples weren't being messed with. Thankfully, they weren't. The sad reality, though, was that in this industry, and despite massive strides in understanding how to use technology to protect worker health, it was all too easy to cut corners in order to increase production. And even more sadly, despite living in one of the most advanced technological ages in human history, coal miners' pneumoconiosis is once again on the rise. In spite of all the technological breakthroughs we're surrounded by, companies are still sending people to work in environments that could severely shorten their lives while not taking the necessary steps to make them safer so that others can live more comfortably.